Hello, my friends. I hope you had a fantastic week. This week, I'm with Grant, talking about wills, powers of attorney, all manner of those things. Get them sorted before you die is the crux, really. Hope you can enjoy this conversation. If you did and took value from it, let me know in the comment section down below. And I'll see you very soon.
For everybody in the audience, I'm Grant. I'm a bloodline planner, and the art of bloodline planning is the ability to write a will about the people in your family, not the money in your family. The idea is that you make the people comfortable about what's going to happen after you're not with them, and you go through an explanation with your family to make sure that they're comfortable about the process, comfortable about what's going to happen, and then you document it in a will. It's very basic, very simple.
Thank you very much for coming on the show, Grant. Much appreciated. And I
Oh,
wanted to talk about all things will and powers of attorney today. Funnily enough, your name jumped to mind. So you wanted to talk about the three pillars before we started. So before I go into some tangent of some description, knowing me, what are these three pillars? How do they work? Why are they important? Etc.
so the three pillars are direction, protection, and mitigation. We like to call them three pillars because they all end in TION. That makes them sound similar, but they do slightly different things. If I take direction first, direction's an interesting one because you're going to write a document that directs things to people. That's its purpose. It's about getting things from where they are to where you want them to be. But along the way, you have to own them correctly to make that happen. And one of the things about a will is it can't change the way you own them. So I'll give you a small example just to make the point. Lots of people who write wills, not everybody, but lots of people who write wills have a house. And there are three ways you can own a house. You can own it solely, you can own it jointly, or you can own it what's known as tenants in common. If you're a single person, you will probably own it solely. If you're a married person or in a relationship person that's under government rules and all that on malarkey, whatever the name of that's called, if you're in those sorts of relationships, you could own it solely, but the other person's probably not going to love you much for that. You're more likely in the UK in England specifically, to own it jointly. And I'd like you to own it tenants in common. I'm going to explain to you why. If you own it solely, you can give it to who you like. That's not a problem. If you own it jointly, you can't put it in your will. Not allowed, because the person you own it jointly has prior rights to that thing. If it's a bank account, if it's a car, if it's a house, whoever you jointly own it with has prior rights, so it can't go in the will because you don't own it and you can't write about it in your will. Because wills are all about the things that you have rights to, not other people.
So here's a question then. If I owned half a house, but my partner owned half a house, could I write my half into my will?
You're almost ahead of me there because the tenants in common is about shareholders and it's about us sharing. So tenants in common is a way of owning something where you can have shares in it, and therefore you can write about your shares and the other person can write about their shares. And that's how we like you to put it in a will, because then you can direct it.
Would the same be true if it, because a lot of the guys and girls who listen to this podcast are going to be business owners as well. Would the same be true if it's a directorship on a business, for example?
Yes, indeed. Yes. Yeah. You do need a business clause specifically to handle that within your will. And then you would do a business will for your business, which is a separate thing. And there are a number of arrangements that you do within your business to handle the shareholdership and what you wanted to happen. And for continuity of the business, there's a whole bunch of stuff. Taking a big tangent there. We're not going there.
It's a good, exciting tangent though.
Oh, it's very
But
exciting.
you mentioned just before the show some really alarming, for me anyway, statistics, right? And I'll let you say them because they're your statistics, not mine.
I'm finished on my pillars, yeah? Come on.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll come back. We'll come back. Don't worry. I just want to quickly
That's fine. Let's do
give some
statistics.
context. I just want to give
Yeah.
some contexts, right? Because I think some people, they think of a will as this thing they do in this kind of race, as we mentioned before the show. where they race to we're going to race to see where we die, and we're going to kind of guesstimate where we're going to die, and then we'll just do a will just before we get to the end, right?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah. So the statistics that I mentioned were 70% of the UK population that should have a will doesn't have a will most of the time. And 30% do. The 30% that do are probably in a state of flux because they've written it a while ago and it needs reviewing, and then they'll go. But at some point it's absolutely accurate, but at some point it's probably not. So the 70%, those people, they're a bunch of people who are into gambling, because the second statistic is 60% of people actually have a will when they die. So double the number of people have a will at the point when they die than at any other time in their life, which means that they've left it late, they haven't done any planning, they've probably missed lots of opportunities, and they've definitely taken a punt as to whether they're going to die when they think they're going to die or not.
So, if you
That's
listen to
mad.
it, something to consider, but so you can plan it correctly, right? Which I'm sure we'll get into. But the other two pillars.
The other two columns. So protection is the other thing that a will give you. It's one of the it's a collection of things, but basically once you've decided what direction, and by the way, a will can direct away from people as well as it can direct towards people. So you can exclude people very effectively from a will. It's a really good place to do it.
And the person being directed away is going to like that very much, but
It depends on how nice they've been to you. It's your life. So
open
you
to
can do.
interpretation from the audience. Carry on.
Indeed. So having directed to somebody, you want to protect it, and by protecting it, you can then introduce things called trusts. And trusts are a fundamental part of how you would construct a will and how you do some planning for your estate, and that is something that can protect, your funds once you've passed away. They're passed to somebody else, and they're held within a trust. Typically, it's a discretionary trust, and the trustees can be the people who are benefiting from it and others to help them guide it through and make sure that that is kept safe for them and for their use only. And it's typically they last about 125 years, so they're reasonably solid investment vehicles for lots of things that you want to do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess the question comes from that though, is because I think perceivably trusts are perceived in this kind of like, I guess, trust baby esque, fund esque kind of principle, right? Around, oh, you have to have lots of money to be able to do that.
Gosh, no.
Is that true?
The tradition of trusts, which were invented by Richard the Lionheart way back in the Crusades, he discovered that when he popped off to go to Jerusalem and do all that crusading malarkey, that some of his mates, when they came back, didn't have the castles and houses that they had when they left, because somebody'd taken them away from them. And so during that process, they invented a trustee, somebody I can leave behind and trust, and they looked after it for them. That was the formation of it. And since then, they've been refined and moved forward. But basically, it was for very rich people. But in the last generation or so, richness has sort of been redefined, that if you had a house and you sat in it for 30 years, it suddenly became incredibly valuable. You didn't actually do anything apart from live in it, but it got very valuable. And because of that, there's a lot more housing stock wealth as opposed to people with large sums of money. There are those as well, but there are lots of people with very valuable houses. And when they pass away, if they don't construct something sensible to pass it to their family, it can be lost or diminished in quite a number of different ways quite quickly. So so it's just there's a larger number of people that have some wealth that they would wish to protect through the use of a trust. So it's become a more commonplace thing, whereas there were a fewer number of people before, and therefore it wasn't such a widespread conversation. Got 2 pillars so far, another one to go. Keep waiting.
Go on, do the third one. Go on.
Oh, all right then. So the key of, just to finish the protection thing is about keeping things. Direction thing is about getting them to the right people. And the last one is mitigation. And that is about, mitigation's a strange word because it is about reducing pain or reducing severity or reducing complications. And in this case, we use it to reduce the amount of tax you might have to pay. Because some people find that painful and severe and all that sort of malarkey. But the mitigation thing is to look and see at legal ways where we can advise you about things you could do, which would mean that you wouldn't necessarily have to pay as much tax, and that you could maximize the number of allowances you have. And there are quite a number of allowances that people can have that will allow them to be completely legal but not pay as much tax when they pass away. And so there's quite a bit of work around there, but it's related to their family. It's not related to I'll just do this and it'll all happen. It has to be in the structure of your family, or else it doesn't work particularly well.
Mm. Would you say that there's I guess, a sweet spot, right? Because I remember having a one-to-one with not yourself or someone who works for your company, but someone in your industry about this, and we were discussing it. You know, you're going to spend this money on this will, right? Great, I've got a will, fantastic. But then I have to go and update it, and I have to update it, and I have to update it, right? And just looking from a probability point of view, of course, there's outcroppers. Of course, this is a gross generalization. But touch wood, I'm not going to die anytime soon, right? But there is also a point, there must be, from a mathematical point of view, I imagine around middle age, whatever that means nowadays, where there's less, you know, you're closer to death than you, which is a really depressing thought. You're closer to death than you know, your birth, right? E.g., at that point, surely it's the seesaw effect, right? At that point, you should be like, yes, I should probably be looking at a will, right?
Nah. Nah. So the truth is nobody knows.
No, of course, that's what I say. There's always going to be out.
And so you can look at all sorts of statistics, and the statistics would suggest that what you just outlined is probable. But it also means that because it's statistics, some people will not get that outcome because it wouldn't be a statistic otherwise. Because if everybody got it, then it'd be a certainty. It wouldn't be a statistic. It'd be a fact, and it's not. So some people will pass early, and some people will pass much later. The propensity to change documentation does depend on how you write it. So the things that are vulnerable, other than your passing, are the people you select within the document. So everybody has to have somebody to execute the document. So an executor is somebody you select. We recommend 2 as a minimum. Other people will, select 5 or 6. The rule of thumb is the more people you invite, the longer it will take to get it done. So 2's a good number. Have some reserves. Don't involve them at the beginning. Just bring them in if you need them. But those people sometimes don't survive you, because there is a tendency for people who are not thinking particularly well to either pick people who are older than them, which is clearly statistically a bit of a problem, or people who are the same age. And again, the statistics don't necessarily marry out that you pick that person so they're going to live longer than you. And so there are some issues about that. The ideal is to select somebody who is younger than you, so that the balance of probability is they're going to be useful to you at the point you need them. Doesn't always work out that way. And that's where the most changes are. If the executors fall off the production line, you need another one.
Of course. I mean, I think also, what jumped to mind is it kind of aligns with your risk profile in some ways as well, right? I imagine people who are slightly more safe-led in respect to their risk profile are probably going to be like, no, I need a will. Yeah, 100% I need a will.
And also, it is linked to how much money you've got as well.
Yeah, that's the thing I was going to mention, right? How much have you got to quote-unquote lose, right?
Yes, if you've got nothing, you probably don't bother about it at all, ever.
Well, yeah, it is what it is. But if you've got, 2 billion or etc., then, man.
But again, you're locking into money, whereas a lot of people, it's very, very important to them at the point where they have children to make sure that they look after their children, and therefore a will is a crucial document at that point. And that's nothing to do with wealth; that's to do with the family again.
Yeah, no, okay, no, that's a good point of view. I mean, this kind of links in some ways to power of attorney, which until, as I said, very recently, I had no idea even existed. So, for the uneducated like me, what is it? Why do I need it? Why do I need to care?
Okay, so power of attorney in its general sense is you giving somebody else the ability to be you in sets of circumstances. So you can have business powers of attorney, you can have a general power of attorney, You can have a health and wellness power of attorney, or you can have a financial power of attorney. They all do different things. The interesting thing about the general power of attorney is that you can give it to somebody, but you have to be fully compos mentis at the point you do it and while they use it. So
Interesting.
you are not you've not lost any capacity at all. You have to have full capacity to use a general. It's just somebody representing you because you can't be at wherever you've got to be where they're representing you.
Okay.
So that's the
Um.
first one. Excuse me.
So
Finish.
the so what is it? But what does it actually do? Because the power. Like, okay, great. It allows you to be you, but in like, why would it be used? In what use case?
Okay, so if we take the power of attorney for a business, which will apply to a lot of the audience, if you are concerned that you could fall ill at any point in your life, and that can be at any point, because actually power of attorneys, this is one of the things that they're done very commonly with wills because people think, oh, I'm getting older, blah, 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 I might lose capacity. Sports people, professional sports people particularly, should have a power of attorney because they could suffer an injury. And I'll use Michael Schumacher as an example of that. Very young guy, had a skiing accident, completely unable to make any more decisions. And with the power of attorney in place, people could have run his affairs on his behalf pretty much straight away because he's still alive, but can't function in the role that he did before. And that's kind of why you need them. But you pick different areas of your life as to where you give people permission, and you may pick different people to do it. So if you have somebody in your life who's really good at finance, then you would pick it for the financial side of things. And if you're somebody who would look after you well and care for you and really make sure that you were all right if you were in hospital, then you'd pick them for a medical side of things.
Mm.
And it's really to get somebody to speak on your behalf when you haven't got capacity. They work differently as well, by the way. They don't all work the same way. So the general one works while you've got full capacity. When you lose it, it goes with you. The financial one comes into play as soon as you have written it and is live immediately, whether you've got capacity or not. So if you give me your lasting power of attorney for finance, I can spend your money while you watch me do it. You can't stop me.
Fantastic. Now,
I'm really
okay.
keen on that one.
I bet you. I bet you are. So the okay. So why in actual reality does that need to take place then? The financial one specifically. Like, in what actual useful value is that?
So if I were not very well and I perhaps hallucinated a bit because I perhaps bumped my head or something, then you would be able to pay my household bills. You would be able to go to the bank, make some arrangements there. You'd be able to help with decisions that would help fund my care. And you wouldn't have to refer to anyone because I would have given you permission. You present an official document which is authorised by the government, the Office of Public Guardian, and then you can go and deal with my affairs on my behalf. And that's good for me because I could be left with no money to look after me because if I didn't give you that permission, nobody would be able to do it, and I'd just left.
Say, because what happens if there is no power of attorney in place then?
You got a problem, Houston. You have a problem, and it comes in different ways. There's a recognition that you would have funds, but how you get them would be a negotiation with the bank to get the funds released, and that wouldn't be a 5 minute exercise. So it's the speed at which the access comes. You would get it eventually. The bank wouldn't withhold forever, but they wouldn't have to run around and make it easy for you. So the power of attorney allows that to happen. The medical one, it works in a completely different way. You have to have lost capacity to use it. So you can't just say, oh, please make some decisions about my pills. If you look like you know what you're doing, they're going to let you do it yourself. And at the point where you've had a practitioner confirm you've lost it, then you can do it. And really, its most successful thing is to get a second opinion. If you think the care for the person you are the attorney for is not that good, then you can get a second opinion, and that's the best and easiest way to get it.
Okay. So I mean, I think it leads on nicely though to the elephant in the room, which is, let's say I die tomorrow without a will, right? Touch wood, I won't. Okay, right? Got a lot of time left. Would be good if I didn't. Thanks. universe, that'd be great. But what happens to all of these lovely assets that I own?
Right, they all go to the people that you want. No, they don't. They go to the people that the government wants because the government's written a will for you because they're really nice. They're really, really friendly.
No, that's nice of them. What does that
You,
will outline?
yeah, well, it's some fairly strict rules. They've changed a little over the years, but there's some strict rules that if you're a singleton person, you're dealt with in one way. If you're a cohabiting person, makes no difference. You're still single. If you're a married person, however, then or a civil partnership person, you're dealt with in a different way. In our lifetime, there's lots of people who are cohabiting, and they're the people that come off worst from a situation where they get the government to allow their estate to be redistributed because the person they're living with has absolutely no rights whatsoever. And
So, really quickly, for those who don't know, what do we mean when we say cohabiting?
living together,
Right. But
but
in what?
not married and not in a civil partnership.
Okay. So how does this actually tangibly work? Right. I've moved in with my girlfriend. We're now cohabiting. Like what?
Yep.
What's? But then what happens?
Let's say you moved in with her and she owns the house and she passes away,
Hmm.
you're homeless because that house will go to her parents or her siblings or whatever, and it'll disappear, and you'll be on the street.
Not a great reality. But
Not,
is there a
not
world?
good, really.
Not really. No.
No.
Is there a world where I guess there is I mean, this is kind of, I guess, the argument about why you need to be careful when and if you move in with someone, right? Because or etc. Right, and understanding who owns what, why joint mortgages are a thing, etc. etc. etc.
But I don't think the joint mortgage particularly will protect you because it's the ownership of the property that will.
No,
Because
no, no, exactly. But
yeah,
that's why these things exist, right?
yeah, yeah.
To
That's why you want a
bring.
will, Carl. That's why you
Uh,
want
you, you see, you see. But I mean, I suppose for me, I think in some ways though, I think there's this level of naivety that comes with youth by proxy, and I'm speaking as a youthful person who is as naive as everyone else. Um, you know, that's like, oh no, I'll sort that down the line. Oh no, I don't need to sort that now, right? But I think, I mean, what is the? I guess there's no probability there, but like, what's the risk outside of the state will take everything of mine? You know, because surely that's not what speaking to
let
the
me let
audience
me
directly. Like, surely that's
let
not what
me
you.
let me take you 10 years up the road and just imagine some stuff. It doesn't have to be specific, but let's just imagine some. Imagine you cohabited with somebody for a period of time and you decided to have children and all that sort of stuff. And then, unfortunately, one of you passed away and the children were named for the person that had passed away. Those children would go into care immediately. They would be go into care and they would have to be assessed if they were still minors as to the suitability of who would look after them next, which is a massively upsetting thing for the children and massively upsetting for whoever is left.
Wouldn't there would just what? So there'd just be no conversation.
There would be a lot of conversations. I'm absolutely certain about it, but
No, no,
the
no, but
actual
as in, like, there would be no, like, oh, actually, this is kind of obvious. Yes, there's no legal document, but this is obvious who the parent is, right?
social services don't know what your relationship is.
Okay, that's fair enough.
And you won't have written anything down to say that we are, a loving couple and we really look after the children together. As far as they know, you're another person that's not related to the person that's just passed away, and the children are named for the person that passed away.
Okay, okay.
You could be the window cleaner. They don't know because there's no structure. There's no marriage certificate. There's no partnership. There's no nothing. So, and they're not doing it because they want to be vindictive. They're just making sure that the safety of the children is
So as I
up.
say, it's a safeguarding issue thing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so let's break apart the concept of actually writing a will. How does that process work? Right, I come to you and go, right, okay, Gareth, let's do it. Let's write my will.
Mm-hmm.
What are
And
we
then
doing? What are we doing?
we'll do Gareth, but we'll call me Grant just for the
Grant,
rest
even.
of it,
Grant, even if I get your name right. Never know.
just for fun. Just because I respond better.
Whoever you are, Let's write this will.
It's a question and answer thing, because the first thing I want to know is what you're trying to achieve. Because if you're doing a will, you're doing it for a reason. It's come to you that you need to do it. And so, what is it you're trying to achieve? Are you trying to protect things? Are you trying to direct things? Are you trying to rule somebody out? Are you just concerned? And so, we need to know what you're trying to achieve. Once we've got what you're trying to achieve, there's a series of information that I need from you. Lots of questions about who people are, their names, addresses, telephone numbers. And the reason we need all of those things is you're not going to be around when your will is active and read out. So we can't rely on you to say, oh, yes, that's definitely John, my friend that I wanted to leave my bicycle to, because I won't know him unless I get a lot of details about it. So I have to get lots of details so I can write it in there so that we make sure we're giving the things to the right people, because you're not there to help us.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's just a lot of getting stuff together. Once it's there, I have some Wizzo software that I pop it into, and you get a draft, which is basically giving you back everything you've given me to make sure I have written it correctly and the spelling's correctly and the numbers are correct. And you just get to check it. It's a Word document. It's really simple, really easy to read. Once you've said that's good, I translate that into a legal draft, and you'll get to see it in a legal format, which is what you're going to get. Once you've got that, I then send it back to you in a paper format, and you sign it with witnesses. Then it's real.
Then it's active. So then if you died a minute later, it would be
You're
straight
good to
away.
go. Yeah, I
Bang.
just put my little blotter on top of the ink, and then we'll be good to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And is the process similar for powers of attorney?
Powers of attorney is a bit more complex. It's a similar process in terms of gathering the information, but there's a gap. Currently, it used to be pre-pandemic, it was about a 12-week gap, sort of semi-deliberate, because the Office of Public Guardian doesn't want you to think you're on your death row when you write it, and then you suddenly get people doing things. Excuse me. They want to make sure you're planning correctly. So there's a sort of a gap. It's currently 20 weeks. The importance of that is that if you are doing it when you believe somebody may be in need of this, if you start that process late, 20 weeks, all the decisions will have been made before you ever get the document back. So it is something that you do need to plan a little bit ahead of time before you start to think it could be a usable document. But as I say, if you're an active sports person or a rock climber or anybody doing anything really active, you probably should have that in place, because stuff happens, and they're not massively expensive either.
No. And they could quite literally save your life, from what I'm hearing, right?
Yes, people can make decisions when you can't, and you never know. Lots of folks bump their heads along the way. Most of us recover, not everybody.
Which is unfortunate indeed. But for those who, have been interested in this conversation, they want to hear some more, maybe get in touch with you about, actually writing these amazing documents that we've just discussed, where can they do that? Where's best to reach out? Where's best to have that conversation, etc.?
They'd get hold of Pep's Assets, my company, and they'd specifically write grant@keptassets.com into their little emailing machine, and magically I'd respond to them by saying, yes, how can I help you?
Great, that's fantastic.
I didn't invent it, it happened before me, but I'm using it because it's pretty cool.
I hear it's magic, but
Yeah. If they're still a bit worried, they can go on my website, and I have a fun facts book that they can download, which will give them some facts about, some of the aspects of writing a will and putting a trust in place and all that. And it's got some information there. Or they can go on to my LinkedIn profile and download lots of interesting videos that'll tell them lots of facts about it all.
fantastic. And as a final thought, or final bit of advice for those who are still, I don't know, like, I've listened to this 30-minute conversation, but I'm still not there.
So what we offer on Wednesdays, on Will Wise Wednesdays, is a 1 hour free consultation where they can either come in person or get me on Zoom, and I'll give them an hour's worth of free consultation work so they can decide for themselves whether it's for them.
Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming back and joining me once again, ladies and gents. I hope you took value from this episode of the podcast. I'll be back next week. for a brand new episode, but talk about something completely new and exciting. Thank you so much for coming back, and I'll see you very, very soon.